Florida prepares for Elsa's landfall. The White House has a new vaccine strategy, and the 4-day work week works, so why aren't we working it? Wednesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Wednesday, July 7th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano, who is in studio.
No, you better believe it, Jill.
But not together with me at the same desk.
No, I am coming to you live from the 26th floor of Ched quarters here in Lower Manhattan, a.k.a. upstairs from where you are, and not my apartment for the first time since March 2020. It feels pretty good, Jill. But how typical is this? My first day in Lower Manhattan, and I don't even know how long, and there's a friggin' ticker tape parade outside today.
Oh, trust me, I know, because I'm in a total panic about how I'm going to get home and out of Lower Manhattan. It starts about 20 feet from the front of our office, so I'm very happy that there's a parade. Not quite as happy that it's located in front of our building.
This is the parade for the essential workers, by the way, so I'm going to go check it out later. It should be pretty cool.
I want to get to the news, but really quickly, just any initial thoughts? How does it feel? Is it weird being back in a building that's completely empty?
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Manny, our security guard, had told me, he's like, I saw the guy, he hasn't been here in 15 months, he just came in, he used to come in early. I'm like, Carlo, he came, I can't believe it.
I just ran into Manny, I hadn't seen him in forever. I went to the coffee cart guy, he's still out there. So yeah, I just ran into Baker in the hallway. So I've already seen more people it's 6:30 in the morning, I've already seen more people today than I probably have in most of the last year.
Well, it's great to have you back, Carlo.
It's good to be here.
All right, let's get to some news here. Tropical storm Elsa getting ready to make landfall on the west coast of Florida, north of Tampa. Elsa strengthened back into a hurricane briefly before being downgraded to a strong tropical storm with maximum sustained winds of 65 miles per hour. About 12 million people under tropical storm warnings across 3 states. Now, once Elsa makes landfall, that system will track over southeast Georgia, the eastern Carolinas, and Virginia tonight and into tomorrow.
Yeah, so if you're in the southeast, just be aware you're going to see probably some pretty bad flooding, maybe some tornadoes. Also, just while we're talking about Florida, a quick update on the situation in Surfside. 8 more bodies found since we came to you yesterday. Death toll in that condo collapse now stands at 36. And the talk from the folks on the ground, I think if you've been paying attention, it's definitely sort of shifted in how they're characterizing things. They've sort of lost that tiny amount of hopefulness that there had been. So this is now a recovery operation, I think, even if they haven't officially said that yet. But just want to stay on the record with this, just an unbelievable, incredible tragedy in South Florida, Joel.
It really is. And just quickly back to Elsa, I was listening to a bunch of interviews with people who live in Florida just along that western coast, and they're like, a hurricane in early July is something that they have never quite experienced as they were boarding up their houses and putting the sandbags in to prevent flooding. So I hopefully that doesn't mean anything for the rest of the hurricane season, but it probably will.
Yeah.
It's just, this is quite unprecedented.
Yeah, I don't think Tampa's not going to get a direct hit because this thing moved a little bit north, but I'm pretty sure Tampa's never actually had a direct hit from a hurricane.
I was near Tampa for Hurricane Wilma many, many years ago when I was working for NBC. I was stationed there. Okay, the White House changing its approach to vaccinations to reach Americans who are still hesitant, as nearly half of states are now seeing a rise in case numbers fueled by that Delta variant. President Biden saying the administration will focus on a community-based approach to reach more of those people, focusing on getting supplies to local doctors and pharmacies. There's going to be more door-to-door vaccinations, mobile clinics, and workplace events in states like Mississippi and Alabama, where just a third of the population is fully vaccinated.
Yeah, so he's basically, the president basically begging people to get vaccinated.
What do you need?
At this point, right? I mean, he's like, I'll come door to door if that helps. But I mean, that's the whole thing, right? It's not a plea from a man most of these people hate is not going to do anything. I don't think. I think the only thing that's going to move the needle at this point, I think, is mandates, right? And the only way we're going to get significant mandates on vaccines is if the FDA does what we were talking about yesterday, a full authorization. That's going to give cover to schools and businesses and work workplaces and other, event organizations that are resisting those mandates right now because they're on this emergency authorization. So, people have been pointing to this study that happened the other day, maybe last week in Israel, Jill, that showed that the Pfizer vaccine had its efficacy drop to about 65% when it came to the Delta strain. So I saw that study, and I didn't really think much of it because to me the headline was that even when Delta did evade the vaccines there, and remember Israel is mostly Pfizer, right? Even when the Delta variant did evade those vaccines, people didn't get severely ill. And they didn't die. Most of them didn't even show symptoms, right? Israel has not had a COVID death in weeks. That's the headline. That's the thing to remember. So there's a lot of fear-mongering out there. And I understand that a lot of people are still, we're still easing our way into this. And this was a really, tumultuous event in a lot of people's lives. Myself included, yourself included, everybody included. But, if you are vaccinated and you are living in the United States of America, you do not need to worry as it stands right now. The best thing that you can do is try to convince a vaccine-hesitant person in your life to get their shot. And look, wear a mask until the cows come home, right? I mean, you do you, whatever works. But just understand that at this point, it's pretty much virtue signaling. And it's amazing to me what a controversial thing that has become to say in this sort of new world of safetyism that we're living in.
So Dr. Ashish Jha from Brown, he's kind of been out front on most of this stuff. He was making the same argument as you just regarding the FDA. He tweeted, "The data is in and it's clear. We need the FDA to fully approve the mRNA vaccines. It would help a lot." And in an interview, he said the FDA has a lot more data on these vaccines than they do on other things that they give full approval to. So It wouldn't be like a rushed thing. At this point, they have so much information. He also said in this interview he was a bit skeptical about some of this new data coming in from Israel, finding that the efficacy against the Delta variant was just 65%. He said it kind of jumped overnight, and he wants to really delve into those numbers. It doesn't seem to jive with what we're seeing in other countries. So perhaps he said maybe it's an anomaly and they'll find out more information as it progresses. He was also asked about this question of what is going to convince the remaining people who are vaccine hesitant to get this vaccine. As you say, certainly not President Biden. So he thinks mandates from schools and companies. And also the reason that he thinks the doctors having the vaccine in a doctor's office is important. He said because if you go to a doctor and you're vaccine hesitant and the doctor kind of persuades you to get it, you're a lot more likely to actually get the vaccine if the doctor then gives it to you on the spot, as opposed to the doctor persuading you, and then you say, okay, well now you're gonna have to go to CVS or this pop-up clinic or wherever else. So I think when you think about it in sort of that practical sense, it does make a lot of sense. I also do think if businesses were to mandate it, and especially universities, I think that's when we're going to see a huge jump with college kids. One other note on vaccines that I wanted to mention, because this was in the news a couple of weeks ago, Israel has reached a deal now with South Korea to give that country 700,000 almost expiring doses of their Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. The first shipments are actually already en route to Seoul. And then as part of that deal, South Korea is going to give Israel the same number of vaccine doses in September and October. But it basically just gets the vaccines to the places that need it right now. So South Korea needs it right now. Israel might need those vaccines a little bit later if people need booster shots. And I mention this because this is the exact same deal that Israel had made with the Palestinian Authority last month that was getting a lot of press. The Palestinians canceled the deal because they said that the vaccines did not meet their standards. To be clear, it's the exact same vaccines that Israel's now sending to South Korea. So Israel had already sent the Palestinian Authority 100,000 doses, and according to Haaretz, the PA destroyed those vaccines. So
I hadn't
just wanted
seen
to
that.
put that on record.
Yeah, one quick thing. I think what you said about the doctor is really important because that relationship with the doctor is, it takes the politics out of it, right? And I think that that's one of the things that really, however, why all of this stuff is politicized to begin with is insane. But you're right. When you're sitting in the doctor's office and you got your shirt off and you're just talking to this guy or woman that you've known for your whole life or whatever, that will, I think, really help, right?
Look, I used to take a lot of advice from my pediatrician, who I don't have anymore because we moved. But she had 2 kids, and one of them was very close in age to my daughters. And any question I had, I'm like, well, what did you do with your son?
Yeah.
And like she told me, I mean, they're practicing what they preach. Most doctors are fully vaccinated. So, it's not like they're telling, saying, they're not trying to make money for these pharmaceutical companies or whatever the prevailing theories are that are out there. Here in New York, Eric Adams will almost certainly become the next mayor of New York City after the Democratic primary was finally called for him after 2 weeks of ranked choice vote tabulating. Adams, if you're not familiar, he's a former police captain who will become the city's 2nd black mayor if elected. He had a lead of 1 point against his closest rival, Catherine Garcia, when the AP called the race for him last night. He's going to face Republican Curtis Sliwa in November. Sliwa's chances of victory exceedingly slim, given that Democrats actually outnumber Republicans 7-1 in New York City. Although we have had Republican mayors, Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah.
I guess Bloomberg switched.
Right.
What did he switch to? He was Republican.
He was everything. I think he was Republican when he ran for the first time. No, you can elect Republicans in New York City, but it ain't going to be this guy. I mean, Sliwa is the founder of this vigilante group called the Guardian Angels, which, if you've ever lived in New York City, it's sort of this like relic of the bad old days of the 70s, where these guys in their little like berets and hats would patrol the subway. So basically, we've got a former cop who lives in New Jersey, at Eric Adams, versus a fake cop who lives in New York with 15 rescue cats. That's sort of one of his claims to fame, which sounds about right for us. But seriously, though, just on this, if you are interested in this, Adams, and if you could take any sort of national, lessons from this, I think what you can take is that Adams won by tacking to the center and appealing to some of the same voters who helped Joe Biden win. Older, moderate, in many cases black Democratic voters. So there's a lesson in there for Democrats who are trying to win some of these big races, Jill. The progressive wing of the party, they're not winning. I mean, there are some notable exceptions, right? But by and large, they have not been winning big races in the last couple years.
I think it's a great point. Okay, on to some business news. Subway making its biggest changes since the sandwich chain launched in the 1960s. The company unveiled a new campaign called Eat Fresh, Refresh that will spotlight new bread recipes, revamped sandwiches with trendy ingredients like smashed avocado, and its first delivery service. Subway is still the largest fast food chain in the U.S., but sales have been on the decline steadily since 2016 as customers' tastes have changed. Subway is also going to give 1 million sandwiches away as part of this new marketing campaign.
This chain, which we've talked about in the past, I think, for some other reason, but they were really hurt in the pandemic, which is interesting because a lot of their competitors thrived, right? McDonald's has been doing great. If you looked at that stock, it's on fire. But Subway doesn't have drive-thrus, and they don't have delivery options, so they were really caught flat-footed by COVID. Now, I think in the past that I've said that there's just something about like the smell of a Subway store that grosses me out and sort of like makes my stomach turn. And a bunch of people actually, when I said that, wrote in and said they agreed with me. It was like one of the things that I got like the most responses about on this podcast, which I thought was funny. But it turns out, I actually looked into it. It turns out what you're smelling, that Subway smell, is the ammonium sulfate that they use in the bread to sort of get it to rise. They bake the bread on premises, but it doesn't smell like if you've ever smelled if you've ever walked by a bakery, it obviously smells a lot different and a lot better. So I think maybe they should try and address that. Eat Fresh, probably the most misleading slogan in marketing history. I mean, this stuff is just processed, meat product, like it comes in boxes from the UPS guy. It's no different from McDonald's or any of these others.
I lived on Subway when I was a reporter in Michigan, because I think in New York we're so used to these delis and bodegas and just a million places to eat. In other places, like when I moved to Lansing, basically, if you wanted lunch, you had to go to McDonald's or Wendy's or Subway. And I think the thinking is that Subway is the best of those options in terms of I know you talk about misleading marketing.
Right. I don't know. I would eat McDonald's before I ate Subway. I really have an aversion to that place. But I do understand what you're saying, that if you want a sandwich in a lot of parts of America, Subway's your best bet. But I gotta say though, Chipotle, they taught the world that like there's a way to actually. I don't really like Chipotle either, but it's clearly better.
I love Chipotle.
It's clearly better for you than Subway. They actually use like natural ingredients, so
they do. They entirely do. And we're now seeing this fast casual. We're seeing healthier casual kind of fast food-esque type chains popping up, which is definitely a good thing.
Right.
Panera, even.
I love Panera.
Me too. Okay, I don't want this to just turn into like where we eat. Okay, an update on a story that we mentioned last week. Sha'Carri Richardson will not be representing the U.S. in Tokyo after testing positive for marijuana. Richardson's been left off of the track and field roster entirely, even though she could have run in the relays, despite her ban in the 100-meter. The U.S. track and field governing body says they sympathize with Richardson, but can't make an exception to the rules this close to the games.
Which is weird, Jill, because they wouldn't be making an exception to let her run the relay. She'd be allowed to do that. So I don't really get that. But I mean, oh my God, this whole thing is just so pathetic. Every way around. I mean, this woman was going to win a U.S. gold in one of the biggest races of the Olympics, and now she's not even going to be there because why? She was caught smoking pot to cope with the death of her mother. I just think everybody involved in this should be ashamed of themselves. And honestly, that includes, you were talking the other day about like some of the sponsors. I don't know if it was in regard to this story or something else, but like.
No, it was the breastfeeding.
Yeah,
it was the not being allowed to have babies.
But where's Nike in this? I mean, they say like they stand with her or whatever, but where are these companies that are actually calling for this rule to be changed? I mean, again, we're barring people from running sprints for smoking pot. If anybody on earth has ever smoked pot, you know that doesn't do anything with regard to your ability to run those races. But Jill, just a quick, while we're on the topic of sports, quick NBA update here. It is finals time. The Phoenix Suns took game 1 last night, their first finals win in 28 years. The Milwaukee Bucks losing their first finals game in 47 years. It just shows you these teams have not gone this far in a long time. Of the 19 players on the floor between both teams last night, 18 of them were playing in their first championship series. Chris Paul put up 32 points, 9 assists in his finals debut. He's only the third player 36 or older to score 30 points in a finals appearance. So props for 36 and up gang over here. But actually, it is really cool to see just how much talent was on the floor that typically doesn't get this far. I really like in sports when you see teams that just aren't typical to of making it to the final final leg, right?
Britney Spears' court-appointed lawyer for her conservatorship case has resigned. Sam Ingham filed paperwork asking the court to dismiss him from the case after Spears testified last month that she didn't even know she had the option to file a request to terminate the conservatorship, which has controlled her finances and her work for the last 13 years. Ingham's been paid $500,000 a year by Spears for the duration of the conservatorship. His resignation comes after the pop star's longtime manager quit, though he was not involved in the conservatorship.
Now her dad just needs to follow suit here and really make this a full house cleaning, I think. I had glazed over what you said when this happened a couple of weeks ago, that she said in that testimony that she didn't even know, I mean, you just said this, but I'm just repeating it because it's really important. She didn't even know that she could ask the court to terminate this arrangement. I mean, that's attorney malpractice, I think, right? This guy should be ashamed. A lot of people should be ashamed today.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that I guess it speaks to just how powerful her own testimony was a couple of weeks ago, because it was the first time that we'd really heard her speak about it. There have been documentaries, and she puts out these kind of cryptic messages on social media. But again, this was the first time, in her own words, we heard what this conservatorship is doing to her life. She has birth control and IUD in, and that she can't get removed without permission. It's just when you think about just what that is doing to, that is a woman who has basically no free will at this point. Yeah,
and a masterclass in public relations on her part, I have to say. Just the way that she shocked everybody with that testimony.
And finally, a years-long 4-day work week experiment in Iceland is being called an overwhelming success by the researchers who conducted it. 2 trials involved 2,500 workers who went down to 35 or 36-hour work weeks for several years. without a reduction in pay. And the results showed that productivity remained the same or even actually went up in most of the workplaces, which included offices, hospitals, preschools run by the government. The trial participants also reported feeling less stressed and burnt out. More than 85% of workers in Iceland have now either moved to shorter hours for the same pay, or they'll be given the right to do so. Wow, I mean that's revolutionary if 4-day work weeks become the norm.
I mean, it's obviously it's Iceland, right? So it's a very different workforce in both size and scale, and shape than we have. They have a much stronger welfare system than we do. But still, the biggest takeaway from the last year, I think, Joe, or one of the biggest takeaways from the last year and change, I think, is just that, and my hope is that as Americans, like, we can really make a change in just how we view work. And I'm not just talking about like going into the office versus going into a remote, which I know that we've debated until constantly for like 15 months now.
If you were going to say till the cows came home, it would have been the second time in this podcast that you said that. And so I was kind of hoping that you would.
You caught me there. Sometimes I still have these old sayings that I think, I don't know if I get them from my parents, but people don't really say that kind of thing anymore.
As you said it, I'm like, the cows
come
where are
home.
they going?
Yeah,
where are they that they need to come home?
It's like a very 50s saying. Well, you scrambled my mind here. What was I going to say? Just the entire concept of like living to work versus working to live, right? I mean, there's some companies here that we're already starting to see this. I think Unilever is one of them, where they're experimenting with their own shortened work weeks. I just hope that it sort of becomes one of these fashionable things. It's not going to work in all industries, right? I mean, it may not work in like hospitals. It probably wouldn't work in the news business. But in places where it could work, like, let's do what we can to sort of get back to some work-life balance, right? After this last year.
What's interesting, though, is that millennials were sort of reinventing the workplace. When you think about WeWork and that type of workspace where there was a keg on tap, rosé on tap, and it was all about kind of this collaboration, work being social. We even here at Cheddar, it's a younger workplace. There is such a different vibe than at some of the other networks that you and I have worked for, other places that we worked, where there's just like cubicles and I think millennials almost did not the opposite, but it was like combining work and life. Work became social, and the culture of a company became really important, and their values, and that I think is still part of what young people are looking for in a company. But now it's the opposite, where it's like you want less time with your coworkers, not more time. Where I think it was kind of the reverse, where millennials in our generation kind of came in, and even younger than us, and said, like, we want it to be fun here. There were what are those games that I forget.
Ping pong?
But it is like ping pong tables, right? Like these tech companies came in, and it was all about making the workplace fun. And the idea was making it so fun that no one wanted to leave, that everyone's kind of like living on campus, So the workplaces evolve, and if there's anything that could shake it up, it's everyone working from home for a year and a half out of nowhere, being forced to. So I think, it's going to be fascinating to see just what happens to work in general.
Absolutely, Jill.
Okay, well, that is a wrap. That is what you need to know for Wednesday, July 7th.
All right, I'm going to come down there and say hello for the first time in person in months.
Yay! Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.